I'm Linda Lee from the Savannah River Ecology Lab, and we are coming to you from the Savannah River site. We are in southwestern Barnwell County, probably about 5 miles from the Allendale County line. And we're here in the fall line sandhills. We're probably about 25 miles from the actual fall line, which goes through Augusta. Beneath my feet is probably Blanton sand. One of the other things you'll find here at this particular site is these ancient river cobbles. These were laid down probably about 3 million years ago in the Miocene era, and they're part of the upland unit of the Barnwell group. But while we're here is they have a fantastic site that I wanted to talk to you about. Our themes for the day are going to be native grasslands and also the effects of land use history and land management on biodiversity. It's easy for us to think about an individual species as being rare, but I think we're less familiar with the concept of a community or an assemblage of plants or animals being rare. But for southeastern grasslands, that is definitely the case. You hopefully have heard of the longleaf wiregrass communities, longleaf savannas, wiregrass sandhills. They're fantastic. But that's actually not what we have here today. It's actually has more prairie affinities than it does with your typical wiregrass sandhills. Species like big blue stem here, rattlesnake master, things like that have, like I said, more prairie affinities. So why is all this stuff here? Like I said, these soils are very sandy, but also these cobbles make this a site that is very unattractive for row crop farming. And there are actually a whole suite of species that once you plow them up, they're basically gone. They don't just seed back in on their own. Wiregrass is a famous example of that. There are a lot of efforts now throughout the southeast to restore wiregrass. We're actually growing it and planting it out because it will not come back. Some of the species of the Midwestern prairies are the same way. People are growing them now and planting them out to restore the prairie because it doesn't come back. And there was actually a study conducted here on the Savannah River site, not by SRL, but looking at the effect of land use history on the plant species that are present. Once you remove the canopy, or some of the canopy, and let the light to the ground, what will come back? And so they chose sites where, because we have aerial photography of the Savannah River site, we know what was in agriculture and what wasn't. So they chose plots, half of it in an area that we know was an old field, plowed up for agriculture, and then a plot of land right next to it that we know was in forest. And sure enough, they found stark differences between what came up in those two different areas. And they found some species in particular that they would only find in what we call the remnant areas, the ones that were not tilled. And I've even seen this effect myself, just cruising down power line rideways on the Savannah River site. You know, knowing of that study, I know some of the species that they had identified as being associated with remnants, and I would find one of these in an area that I thought was old field. You know, why is this here? And then I'd go back to the office and look at the aerial photography and realize that I had been in a hedgerow, a very narrow strip of land between two fields that was not plowed. So why am I talking about power line right-of-ways? Because the other part of this equation is land management. If you just leave a parcel of land here in the southeast, don't do anything to it, it's going to grow trees, right? Probably sooner rather than later. So if you want this, you have to manage it. In the past, it was wildfires. Now it's prescribed fire. It could be mowing. There was probably some grazing at one time too. But anyway, that's where my colleague from Forest Service comes in, Charlie Davis. He actually found this area while it was still in plantation forestry, saw some cool plants here, recognized the significance of it, and decided to manage it for the ground cover to support pollinators and support biodiversity. So I'm just going to let Charlie tell you about this. This is his baby.
So the backstory on this, as Linda had mentioned, was originally a plantation pine of longleaf. We burned it as we do prescribed fire, and it got a little hot, and we scorched some of it, and we decided we had to salvage it and replant it. But when I came out here to look at the understory to what was left after the fire, it was kind of a interesting area because it had a number of, we have one rare species out here. It had a number of interesting other understory species like yucca. And I asked the forest managers, I said, can we like set aside like 4 acres here? Just give me 4 acres to work on and see what happens if we don't plant it back to pine. Because when we do put it back in plantation pine, we normally come in and do some site prep, chemical treatment, and we eliminate a lot of that herbaceous forb understory to begin with. And so I said, just give me a few years, let's watch what happens. And amazingly, we went from like 5 really interesting species to 160 species out here now after 5 years of watching what happened. So we've done a few management efforts here. We've mowed a few times. As you can see, the broadleaf, the hardwoods are starting to take over now. And so what we'll likely do is come in and manage this with a mowing. We'll bush hog it, lay some fuel down on the ground, and then we'll come back and burn it. So we bush hogged this once and we burned it twice so far. And so fire is integral to maintaining these grasslands, and so what we hope this is going to become is what we call a post oak savanna. There is some post oak out here that we're going to allow to come on as some overstory trees. They'll probably have a few longleaf come in here. As you can see on either side, this is a longleaf plantation, and what we ultimately would like to see is this utilized by the forest in that we're growing seed here. There's one particular plant we'll look at too, and that's what we call rattlesnake master. Not rare, but it is a good indicator of a prairie type habitat. There was only like 1 or 2 rattlesnake master out here, and now it's like taken over the 4 acres. And so one of my favorite plants, so we'll look at that as well. All these flags are rattlesnake master. There are species of flies and bees that just will cover this.
And there's a rare insect. I don't think it's been found down here. It's
a moth,
right?
And it's only I guess it burrows into the stalk of this plant. Borer. Yeah, it's a stem borer, and it's, I don't know if it's listed as endangered or not, but it's a rare moth that is only connected to this particular species of plant.
That's its larval host.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, totally dependent on this.
And so we've been collaborating with some people in other universities who are interested in this large population of rattlesnake master we have out here.
We can look at some of just a few of the plants that are out here. This is, I guess, narrow-leaf blazing star, Laetris tenuifolia. This is Agellinus. It's probably Agellinus cetacea. It doesn't really have a good common name, and the common name for them is Gerardia, which was just the old genus. Hawthorn. I thought at first it was some Carolina rose. I'm sure we have that out here. Here's the Carolina greasy grass. Look at that. This is actually a state listed plant. There's one right in front of Charlie right there.
Tridens.
Tridens carolinianus.
Yeah.
There's some right behind you too. Yeah, this. And so that's another lesson for today. Not all rare species have big, pretty flowers, but they're still important. We call it Nolina georgiana, but it's also called Georgia beargrass. Don't know how I got that name. It is a relative of yuccas and things like that. Nice sandhills plant. As far as I know, there's some species in Florida, but this is the only one in South Carolina. And as far as I know, you'll only find it in the fall line sandhills. As far as I know. Yeah. But yeah, all this beautiful long leaves.
Again, a good indicator of a remnant.
Yeah, it has a very hardy, long-lived root. It doesn't, like a lot of these plants, they don't necessarily produce a great seed crop, that comes up every year, but their strategy is to have a long-lived, mature plant that can survive just about anything. That's how wiregrass does as well. The deer have really been hitting these. Normally they would have actually seed stalks about yay high. But that deer have hit.
Yeah, it browse them down.
This is a good shot of big blue stem, why it's called big blue stem. It's a little unusual for our area because it's more of a prairie species. We usually have little blue stem at most sites here, which is about this tall. There's some of that out here too. For comparison, here's the little blue stem
It's
plant.
almost like a monarch there.
Where?
Just,
Oh, it did look like one.
Oh, it does. Oh my goodness.
I think it is.
Scaly blazing star.
Yeah.
That's something that's really not very common at SRS either. That right there. That's it. It's not very showy this time of year. So there's the marble seed, Onosmodium. That's one that is kind of more of a, to me, a prairie type thing too. We have blue curls still in bloom, Trichostoma, curly anthers, Sporobolus gentius.
Teeny tiny seeds.
Yeah.
We can always find quail in here too, where you won't find them anywhere else.
So that's Coreopsis major, something tick seed. Coreopsises are tick seeds.
This is probably decent coneflower habitat because
Yeah.
it's got all the associates here. Nice deer rub right there.
Oh yeah.
We have bald eagles out here all the time too. Well, that tail blinds you, doesn't it? We ordered that special today. So I've got an assortment of hickory and post oak out here and blackjack.
So your management goal is basically like oak savanna.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just an oak grassland. We want a grassland here basically so we can burn it easily to maintain the hardwood.
Right. Right. So oaks are somewhat fire tolerant. People down here think about that oaks we burn to get rid of the oaks, which is partly true, but it's interesting, if you go up in the Northeast, they burn to keep their oaks because they'll be overrun by maples and other things like that. But oaks are somewhat fire tolerant. So we can have both. If you have a higher fire return interval, then you can keep them down. Yucca filamentosa, great fiber plant. Very interesting plant. It also hosts some interesting insects. Yucca moths. So it has a very unusual pollination syndrome. One of the few obligate mutualisms that we know of, and one of the few examples of active pollination, where the moth deliberately collects the pollen and actually deliberately puts it in the stigma. This is compass plant, so it's kind of done now. It would have had yellow rays if we'd been here a few weeks ago, but it's another good remnant plant. You find it in the wiregrass sandhills too, and also on the prairie. There are many, many different species of goldenrod here in South Carolina. This one we call sweet goldenrod, Solidago odora, and we call it that because the foliage has a wonderful fragrance actually. Well, to me it's wonderful, kind of licoricey, greenish, and you can actually make a tea from it.
Lots of butterflies out today.
And here's the post oak.
I'm really excited about trying to promote this in terms of forest management, of just maybe taking 3 or 4 acres that have a seed bank here. We call these remnants. And what we ultimately would like to see is this utilized by the forest, in that we're growing seed here, basically. We want to see these pollinating plants move into the forest outside of these areas.
Take homes for me, I guess, would be, there's some things that you really want to preserve because you can't get them back. It's not all the same. And the other is, you work with what you have, and you can still provide benefits to pollinators even if you don't have a remnant stand like this, just by managing it for grassland. You will have some kind of flowers, and they will attract pollinators. You can still do good.